When asked about Tony Stark, Elon said, "What I like about him is, he was the CEO, but he was also like the chief engineer, and usually very often companies they have kind of like the business guy in charge, and then there's the engineer who's not in charge. I like the fact that the engineer was in charge." As you all know, the character of Tony Stark was directly inspired by Elon Musk in the Marvel movies, as stated by Jon Favreau, the director of Iron Man, and Robert Downey Jr., who plays the famous superhero. According to Downey Jr., before the first Iron Man was in production, he and Favreau were trying to develop the angle from which they were going to portray Tony Stark, but were not having much luck. However, Downey Jr. made a very odd suggestion and said that they needed to sit down with Elon Musk in order to make Tony Stark real on screen. To quote Favreau, "When I was trying to bring the character of genius billionaire Tony Stark to the big screen in Iron Man, I had no idea how to make him seem real." In response to this, Downey Jr. determined that they needed to sit down with Musk. In March of 2007, Downey Jr. set off for El Segundo to try and find SpaceX's headquarters. By some miraculous coincidence, Downey Jr. ended up receiving a personal tour from the man himself. Afterwards, Downey Jr. reported that his mind was not easily blown, but this place and this guy were amazing. According to the Iron Man lead, SpaceX's headquarters was filled with enthusiastic employees, both engineers working white-collar jobs and factory assembly workers working blue-collar positions, all sharing easy conversations and a genuine excitement. Musk himself gave Downey Jr. the impression as the unpretentious sort who could work alongside the people in the factory. According to Downey Jr., both Musk and Stark were the kind of people who would seize an idea to live by and something to dedicate themselves to. It was an enlightening experience, and experiencing SpaceX's facilities and Musk's accessible eccentricities sent Downey Jr. back to the Iron Man production office with quite some inspiration. Musk also recalled this meeting. "When Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. were doing the first Iron Man, they came to visit me to ask for some advice on the script. And someone had told them that I was similar to Tony Stark or something, and so they came in. They got a tour of Tesla and SpaceX, and they asked me, 'Iron Man has these powers. How could you? What sort of explanation could there be for them?'" One of the first things that Downey Jr. apparently demanded was a Tesla Roadster in Tony Stark's workshop as a symbolic gesture. "After meeting Elon and making him real to me," said Downey, "they became contemporaries. Elon was someone Tony probably hung out with and partied with, or more likely went on some weird jungle trek together to drink concoctions with the shamans. It is a strange thing to consider with the benefit of hindsight, but when Iron Man came out, Favreau began talking up Musk's role in the creation of the character, and people were skeptical. It seemed like a stretch to most of the public at first because they'd never known the, at the time, PayPal guy to have any adventures of the kind Tony Stark had. However, the press lapped up the comparison, and over time, the people started to understand the eccentricities of the businessmen behind Tesla and SpaceX. Musk later calculated that his life was about 10% playboy and 90% engineer. After moving to a house in Bel Air, Musk found himself nestled between Quincy Jones, the music producer, and Joe Francis, the creator of the Girl Gone Wild videos, and found himself taking part in the Hollywood nightlife and his social scene with his new neighbors and friends. According to Bill Lee, Musk's close friend, there were a lot of parties to go to. Elon was neighbors with two quasi-celebrities. Our friends were making movies, and through this confluence of our networks, there was something to go out and do every night. This new perception of Musk continues to this day, and Musk has been very happy to associate himself with the superhero. In his own words, "I like that the engineer was in charge." It might be because of this love for Iron Man that means that he has gotten even more involved in Iron Man 2 than he was in the first one. The Tesla CEO welcomed some of the filming inside his own facilities in SpaceX and even made an on-screen cameo appearance in the film. In this cameo, he is referred to by name and meets with Tony Stark with a compliment and a handshake, which definitely adds some credibility to Downey Jr.'s statement about Stark and Musk likely having been guys who would have hung out together and partied. Although Iron Man 3 is out at this point, and there doesn't seem to be any shamanistic concoction drinking by the pair in the movie, there's always hope for Iron Man 4 though. To conclude, although Musk hasn't invented a robotic suit yet, he may arguably be considered our real-life Iron Man. His influence on the most recent incarnation of the superhero is undeniable, and even if he and Robert Downey Jr. hadn't met face-to-face, there are too many elements that the two have in common to be a coincidence. Their determination, their inventiveness, their fixation on technology as well as robotics and what it can do, as well as both being engineers and CEOs of their companies at the same time. So alongside everything else that Musk has invented for people today, We may also have him to thank for the film that launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Plus, if a mysterious man ends up flying around in a robotic suit anytime soon, we all know who to blame. And that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and until next time.